Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. Cheers. Some my cherry blossom tea. I want to record another message. Essentially, pointing to the same thing in a new way. And how I see it recently, it's quite interesting. It's fascinating because there is this indeed a stage shift, if you will, or that resolution of that tension, of that disorder that you may experience in your heart, right? And it is always done with undivided attention. Again, that's another term to say, to place your attention on the awareness. Unfragmented attention. That's why it's so important. The attention is so important. And if you are experiencing these types of blockages, negative feelings, and stuff like that, the only thing that it's asking of you, as I said many times before, is just to place your undivided attention there. And you're not doing anything, it does everything. But something is going on. Something may be burning up if it's necessary, sparkling if it's necessary. Whatever is going on there, whatever has to going on in your heart. And it might be a little bit like dying every day or all the time. That's the paradox. And of course, in that dying, there is that feeling, what I always call peace and bliss. But you can name anything you want. People call it love. And it always arises upon, ironically, you moving in the opposite direction of the masses or the people around you. Most people around you. And there is this some sort of release, the true release, not this temporary release through the seeking of pleasure. There's some interesting bird that just came. I think that's the bird that was hunting my fish. It's basically catching fish in flight. Like that. Nuts. But here he is. So there's this, a true resolution. Okay? Also, I want to notice how this resolution can only arise when there's no calculation or there's no measuring or selfing. I talked about this before. There is a one function of your brain, the calculator brain, not the mind, but the brain, that may intervene this process and say, let me help you start calculating. And as soon as it does that, then there is no enjoyment. So if you are in a state of calculation, you cannot be enjoying yourself truly. There's no spontaneity, there's no just the true state of enjoyment if you're in a state of calculation. Notice that. like within your body. Notice that when the mind just comes in and starts calculating things. I've noticed that, and every time I start doing that, it accumulates, it sort of backlogs the pressure almost. And then it requires way more of my attention. I have to bring my attention there. And return to my center, there's another way of saying it, for this to start dissolving. And sure enough, as soon as it starts dissolving, there's joy. And it's fascinating. If the mind just comes in, which sometimes can be called selfing, and starts like self-judging, imposing a measurement, every time it does that, it cramps your style. Isn't it interesting? How important it is to retire from that motion. And the best thing that does that is your full and divided attention. When there's a full and divided attention to the world of feelings, there's enjoyment there. But as soon as you're in a process of thinking, the enjoyment goes away. And you can control the thinking through your will. The only way out is through the eye of a needle, or placing your undivided attention to the source of that disorder, that negative feeling. And it requires undivided attention, which I call it courage and surrender. The attention part is detects this source, and the undivided part is the part of the awareness that connects it to the background. And there's this toroidal flow. And so because this toroidal flow is flowing within you, there's this ecstatic state of consciousness that is there all the time, because there's nothing, backlogged, so to speak. But as soon as that process comes in, like that thinking process, when you lose your attention, okay, or when your attention is no longer undivided in your heart, you got that backlog again. And that energy now, what's going to happen then? Instead of having this, what people call sometimes high pressure toroidal field energy flow, when you block this reciprocation, it creates the upper and the lower, right? And now this upper and the lower wants to reconcile somehow. And so then you engage into the pleasure seeking, resolution seeking externally. That's the function of the mind now, is functioning, okay? And so if you continue seeking that resolution through pleasure, this particular pleasure that we're talking about, anything you do in that case, unless it's undivided attention to the source of that disorder, which separated and split into upper and lower, and made you have a desire to do whatever externally to resolve that lack, is now, if you do succeed doing that, that block is gonna be made even worse. Okay? Notice that in your life. If you just go out on a quote-unquote bender or whatnot, like, it's obviously, how bad does it feel later, right? It always works like that. Okay? So anything that you do from that point on is going to be to resolve that type of block, that lack that is inside. It's very tricky. And But if you do, I don't know how it is. You know that word death that people sometimes talk about, and it is, for example, living in a real time and having that reciprocated toroidal energy field always flowing in the background, which where all the joy, love comes from. That's actually that's actually only when you even have a capacity to love. Without that, it was a pleasure seeking that's been called love. It was actually lust, as I call it. Generally, there's usually if you if you don't have that undivided attention in your heart, you're not sort of guarding the portal. You're not letting the source move through you. You're not in that. Sometimes people call quantum energy field and whatnot. But the problem with people living in the conceptual world and not actually doing it, or they're doing it some exercises, the external exercises and things like that, to chase that state. And even if they acquire that state, it is not it. It was done by the wrong direction. Okay? This is why I said before that seeking that bliss, seeking that quote unquote ecstasy. I shouldn't call it ecstasy because it's not. We have to be very careful with words here. It's not an ecstasy. But let's say, I don't know what that is. Dark passion, sometimes I call it, or this dark bliss. But even the word bliss is too beautiful for it. I don't know what would be high. Okay, let's just say being high. Chasing the high, even through breathwork exercises, even through meditation retreats, everything, right? All of that is a coping mechanism. This is why with my videos I alienate all these people who move in that direction. But I cannot help but speak the truth. And so I am a type of outsider. But it's the best place to be in this world. Like Jesus said, I'm in the world, but not of the world. And that's what he meant. He meant that you are in this reciprocating toroidal energy field, right? Which is not a type of, I'm going to get to this one point and it's going to be kind of over. It is an ongoing process, and it's ongoing attention that's been undivided within your heart. That's almost like decodes the matrix, right? Sometimes I use this like an analogy. You got to build your crystal in your soul in order to correct for the brokenness of this mirror that is the matrix. And when you correct it, it reflects the beauty again, not the corruption, because of your endeavors in the heart. To me, it's quite clear when my attention is lost, and as soon as I lose that attention, the mind starts coming in and doing this thing. This divisory. And I've noticed, like, oh, it's seeking some sort of satisfaction there to compensate for the fact that there is a negative feeling in my heart. And I'm like, okay, we're not doing that anymore, okay? And we go straight to the attention, undivided, which is all your attention belongs to awareness. And it is, in a way, a type of decoding, but It's not a calculation. You are just placing your attention where it needs to be played, and you take no action, and you trust that that type of reconnection of those things is going to decode that problem, if you will. And if you really want to be looking from the lens of a geek, then it is possibly something like that is going on. These errors of that you would call negative feelings, distortions, before it even comes into information, there are errors there. These are distortions. These are something that is incorrect. So those errors are being corrected, but it cannot be corrected by your calculating mind. It cannot be calculated by your binary computer. It can only be calculated by your quantum computer, if you will. And that is done through that complete undivided attention that is placed on the source of that negative feeling and connected to the background of everything. That's how I would say. Okay, this is the best way that I could describe, which is a type of faculty that everybody has, but not everybody can touch that, the deepest points. Some, and they don't have to. Some they could just deal with, like I said, at the emotional level, and that's enough for them. Okay? But they don't have to go live that deep. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, but it's this, I don't know, guys. It's so clear that you're like on a different, but it's not. Also, it's not a any kind of superiority either. Sometimes I see people like getting frustrated and wanting this thing, and that frustration and the wanting this thing is the problem, right? It's because the mind is wanting something that mind cannot do. So everybody does have this capacity, but it is not done by the mind. And the most profound and interesting art to me is to be able to do this yourself every day, every moment, because like I said, these are time fractals that always needs your decoding as it's going. And so this is why it's amazing to live like there on that edge of life, because whatever comes to you is being automatically transmuted. In all sorts of things may come to you, okay? All sorts of attachments, also some past memories and these negative feelings from the past, and all sorts of situations like that. It just keeps coming to you. And it seems that like right now we live in this time where this particular time is just going to keep bringing that to us until we resolve. But then you can see that sometimes people keep seeking the external solutions in the hedonistic pleasure way, or ascetic pleasure, which is the same thing, just a different direction. Not a direction, different side, I suppose. And so to me, it's just like calling us to our heart, so to speak. But again, this is not a conceptual thing. There's a problem with the conceptions and conceptualizing everything. This is why for somebody who has not fell through into that state through some pain or pressure, right? For somebody who did not go through that resolution of that pain and pressure through their own attention and awareness, and not the external mean, not even imagination, it cannot be related. Does that make sense? For example, if you know it as a concept, the mind's going to try to create what would be like, and so it will be creating something that it has a frame of reference, right? It creates drug-like effect. Say like, oh, this is how oneness feels like, right? So, oh, so you're saying we should call upon the one? Okay, here's my closest guesstimate of what that is, and so there's your high. And then sure enough, after that, there's a crash because the resolution was not there, and it was just being made worse. But upon facing it, upon the dissolution of it, what happens is it's quite fascinating. You know what happens? A feeling that you've never felt before. And it's almost like a continuous, newly discovered feeling that you can always call it as it has a tone of bliss, but it's always new. It can never be frozen. And even I speak right now with you, I feel all sorts of things arising. And I'm placing my attention there and my undivided attention there. I'm not telling it what it's supposed to do or what it's supposed to be. But there is this process that's going on that is quite deep. And it is related to the states of consciousness, you know, these epsilon, delta, theta. And I'm working on some theories of how to resolve all of those. We always go through these like cycles, and we keep on resolving them to bringing that disorder into the coherence, bring that disorder into coherence. And there are many versions of those disorders. And in current model, I have 56. And so every single day, almost, you almost like are being brought to one of those, and asked to resolve that. And it just keeps going and going and going, and you're becoming better and better to go through these portals almost. It's quite interesting to call them portals, because when I did this one-on-one session with Landon, I mean, it was very clear of how he was brought to that portal, and that node that was there waiting to be opened, that was not yet looked at, but it was time, and he came to it. He had that rush before, and then he did have that capacity to just, and then sure enough, what did he say? Joy. And he said, it seemed that all that there is joy. And so there was that fear or pain or whatever that hasn't been untangled yet, that just kept that joy from flowing, and engaged into, might engage you into some sort of like pleasure-seeking things to compensate for the lack of joy that is trapped within your soul. Okay. And yes, it may not be easy, and there are times where it's quite difficult to break all of that into the coherence again. And you may be needing to have some sort of like deliberation to place that attention there. Because the motion is sort of gravitating or trying to push you away from it. And that's the challenge. That's defending your throne. Okay. And so when that happens, when these challenges come along, it requires your undivided attention. Even if you do things because you got to do other things as well, even as you move, as you do other things, there's undivided attention there still. And of course, the focus is more on like enjoying things as well, whatever you do, not trying to get them done. Again, I this is why nothing conceptual I can say that really is helpful, because this is why, guys, like if you're still watching this video, just book on one-on-one session, and then everything's going to be clear, because I can bring you to that point where you need to open up yourself, and then you know what it's like to be on this outsider zone, I suppose, being in the world but not of the world. You're still functioning in the world, I still do all the things that I have to do, and meet the people that I have to meet. There's no actual sort of like an avoidance there, like, oh, I can't be around people because people are negative and all that stuff. There's just that I don't know, you're just in this reality bubble that feels awesome, and sure, some people may apply a little bit more of a pressure that you may need to alchemize, but I don't have any other solution, and nobody will ever find the other solution. There's people talk about this way and that method. There's no method, there's no way. It's always going to be the exact same thing as always was, always will be. And just you connecting the right dots within your consciousness through your attention and awareness. Okay. And for example, speaking of revising the past, because a lot of things may come to you from the past, and she's like, oh, because that's been happening to me. It's just like all these things from the past coming along and give me the picture again, and like I try to resolve it with my mind and logic, and of course it doesn't not work. But the correct thing is to hold that picture that came to you with everything that it came there, with all this negative feeling that it came to you, and just hold that picture and stay with that negative feeling and really see if it's negative. Really, really give all of your attention to see what is this. Okay? There is this type of looking or listening that is the way, the only way. And there might be the mind is like, oh, how do we get rid of it? How do we get rid of it? And just like, okay, let's just not try to do anything with it. Just be attentive in its entirety and completion. And there's something magical that is there. And then what happens then? That call that came to you from the past has a gem there. That negative event that happened there had a negative connotation. But now, as you are burning it all up, the negative connotation disappears. The image may remain, that negative image may remain, but it doesn't have a charge anymore. It's like there's just peace in the background of it. And so there's this chronological memory that brought to you what I call chirological past. The chirological past is that negative feeling. That's what I call chirological past. Or you even can go deeper and to call it like, archonic past if you want. But anyway, there's there, right? And so there's this resolution at the root cause. And then when it's there, that resolution, then you may want to look in what was the real desire there. Now that it's resolved, not that you're now trying to fix that negative feeling because you've dissolved it, but now you may want to look into like, what was that desire that I really wanted to happen at that particular event that came from the past? And then you look at that, and then you see that way. And then there is an experience now in your imagination, fulfillment of that desire. Not as a egotistical way of saying, okay, I didn't get that, so I still hold that grudge on top of this, but I'm gonna still use my imagination and seek that positive thing, even though everything starts from that negative. And so that's, of course, not it. But once you no longer have that seed that is that negative, when that is resolved, then you go into imagination, and then you let these positive feelings that's already there to give you a picture and the image of what was your real soul desire in that particular situation. And so there's going to be a strong resolution, and you're going into the more like a personal feelings, and whatever feelings you're gonna feel, I don't want to suggest anything, but these are going to be the real feelings of your true soul desire that you could never touch them before because of that distortion that was there in your heart. And now imagination can be used appropriately. Now you're turning on the magics because there's already resolution in your heart. Then you're turning on the magics. And then if you need to take some action in life, then you turn on your logic, so to speak, like it's all external then. It's very important, this process, so important, and sometimes when these challenges come along, I catch myself going on the old patterns again, and addressing it in the wrong way. I say like, well, no, let's not go into the logics or the magics. Let's just look at this negative feeling fully, completely. Sure, I may see why and what it is related to, what kind of events in my life, but let's just look at that feeling in the contrast or in the background of those events that took place in my life. And so that is true revision, as Neville Goddard was talking about. And you keep doing that. These negative things come along, the negative thoughts, negative things and whatnot, and you got to turn them into positive by first dissolving the negative. This is where like that third sun of consciousness is necessary, that in your heart that is capable of burning these distortions up. And then as it's burning up, turns into a peaceful, blissful feeling as a basis of reality. Then what you may imagine, and now these positive feelings or emotions at this point coming online, and now you can finally enjoy your imagination. So there is this type of holistic approach to life. It's real, and I suppose that's the only place where the love is anyway. And some people fall through into this spontaneous space temporarily. And like that Shire before the Lords of the Rings, or at the beginning of the Lords of the Rings, or before war, that Shire that was kind of perfect and everything's kind of great, right? But then the test comes along and says like, yeah, the Shire is no more. You got to go through war to defend the right of the Shire. And so that is when that alchemical path I don't know if you can call it path, but there is a type of quite backwards approach to feelings as opposed to everybody else is doing. And and sometimes I get kind of frustrated with this, and I can't blame me, because I know sometimes, or in the past, that's what I was doing. But I don't know, like even in the past, I had some realization that feelings must be faced, but perhaps I was not doing this to this extent that I'm doing now. But when I look at people and going in that wrong direction, seeing these experiences, talking about this as it's like some sort of enlightenment, illumination, or things like that, and I know what they're doing, and some of them know what they're doing too, but some of them don't know what they're doing. And there's this desire to sort of like correct, externally, try to correct externally, but it does not work. It's like, somebody's like hooked up on like a video game, and you try to drag them away from the computer. It's very difficult. Well, Even if you do, they're just going to be pissed off and go back to the computer because they are in that thread. So you can't even distract them from the distraction that they're in. They have to be sort of somehow done with that and somehow see the futility of that, and only then they might be sort of open. They have to be done seeking. I think Eckhart Tolle said like that sometimes, and he referred to Buddha, and he said that even Buddha was seeking most of his life until he had to give up under this Bodhi tree, when the realization came that the entire time he was going in the wrong direction. And he was still in the mind and did not fall through into his heart. And once he did, it was over, and he stopped doing all this ascetic nonsense, and the seekers who were there thought that he lost it. That's the story that Eckhart Tolle is talking about. But in his view, he says that he had to seek. He had to seek and seek and seek and seek, almost like trying every single permutation that is possible for the mind to give up. It's like mind may end up trying all possible options, and only as a last option it chooses surrender and courage. That may be the case. I don't know. So if that's the case, then perhaps people that are in that seeking mode cannot be stopped, and you have to just let them be in that seeking mode. And as long as you do your due diligence, as long as you are living life at the edge holistically, and yes, at this point, there are few people, not a lot of people in my life that are on this side of the pond. But it's enough. And there's going to be more. There's going to be more. But it's, you see, like, that was my lesson, that I try to create something with the people, but if they are not yet crossed this line, and they're not living through the heart, they're just not part of our tribe. And it's not like an elitism or anything like that. It's just the fact that there is a matrix way of life and there is a holistic way of life. And people who are done with the matrix will come into the holistics. This happens in the heart. Then everything changes, and the way you make your decision changes. Everything changes. And then you naturally cannot connect with the people that are in the matrix way, and you end up connecting with the people that are part of your tribe. It's fascinating how it all works. But you see, the interesting part is that on this side, there's no, or at least if you're really, really deep into your essence, so to speak, and then you go through life, then watching people, it's interesting experience. It's like there's no judgment there. People talk about judgment. It's the same process of the logic intervening. It's just one little process. You can call it selfing. That is a problem. But it's on only because you are not in your heart. That's the only reason that it's on. But as long as you don't move away your attention from the heart. And again, this is not it's not a will thing. It is interesting. Like, as I'm talking about it, like, now I'm aware of that thing. I don't have to, like, it's not an act of will. You do have a capacity for whatever that act is, but I always look at it as an eye. You can open that eye and you shine the light on any kind of blockages that are, and just gonna burn it all up, and then they're just gonna go through. It's interesting. But once you, oh my God, once you do it a few times, when I say do it, I mean every time it comes off the challenge and it's like, okay, this is like really negative feeling. All right, go in, and you go in and you resolve, and something amazing happens. Then you know, okay, you got it, you got something. But it's not, you have a capacity. The next challenge is going to come along, is going to be a little bit different, but so at least this is how I experience it. Okay, it's I'm sure if I talk to people who live on this, and that's what they would say as well, that it's an ongoing process and it's a ongoing surrender. You just become good at it, so to speak. And then it becomes like an automated process where you don't really need to. You don't lose that attention. It's just there, and it's just becomes what I call. You got to put some work to start this nuclear reactor, but when it's going, it's going. And then you just need to make sure that it's going, and it's going to keep on going. And if I move away my attention from there, or going to, sometimes what happens, like, I don't smoke a lot of weed anymore. On the weekends, just a little bit. But sometimes I may get a little bit too excited and smoke too much, and I'm like, oh, and then I lose the attention. And then there might be also supporters open up and fulfilling the lustful type of, desires, or like eating way more, like munchies, for example, right? Like you eat way more than you really need. It's a type of gluttony, you know? Or you may even have thoughts about it, like, oh, why don't you just watch porn? Yeah, just relax, just watch some porn, go whatever. These thoughts come along because what happened? The attention got divided, and now your mind is trying to say, hey, let's connect the dots that are separated in your heart right now. And so there you go. So to me, the lesson is that, again, I'm not saying now, oh, never smoke weed or whatever. No, it is about the attention. Anything that you take, if it divides your attention in your heart, then it's a no-no. If it helps, then it's a yay. And also, there are phases where you're going through, like, this, right? Like this week, for example, it's been a lot to digest, right? Not crazy, but a lot. There's a lot burning up even right now as I speak. So, it's this motion, right? But when it passes, for example, and now you're stable and you don't have to really almost like guard your portal, and things are just going smoothly, and you already done the work, then yeah, then it's time for celebration. And then you may notice that you smoke the weed and or drink some alcohol, and it's just like, wow, it's just enhancing your experience, and it's just like a thing that you just enjoy, like you drink a glass of wine with food and whatnot, and it's just like, relaxes your body. It doesn't mess with your psyche. The same thing with weed. You smoke some weed, then you feel like, oh, your body's relaxed, the energy's flowing, great, but did not invade your heart. But sometimes there are times that you're more vulnerable, and these times better not to take it. And it's not because it's that thing that you take is bad. It's because it's just you're going to lose the attention. That's the way I measure right now. When your attention is going to be divided in your heart, that's through where the demons come in, so to speak. Rather than these same demons being transmuted and into angels, they come out and then they are seeking out. Okay? And if you're regularly like this and got used to this alchemical process that keeps on happening, it's never ending, really, but you can just get really used to it. Then you intuitively know when is what and what to do. And what I call after this alchemical process, that's when you go into the theurgy. But I didn't talk a lot about the theurgy because this is kind of new thing for me, and sometimes like, how do we even talk about this? Now, this thing cannot be understood by anybody unless somebody who's already been seasoned alchemist. I shouldn't even say even that. Like, you don't want to be an alchemist either, because maybe at the beginning you can call yourself that, but eventually you get to the point where it just becomes the background of your life and nothing to focus on. Does that make sense? You just live your life. But to escape that gravity of the matrix, it seems that you do need to be a bit of an alchemist, meaning it takes a lot of your attention and there's a lot of distractions, and you got to get that escape velocity, as people say, not to have that gravity by the matrix anymore, and stabilize into another motion of life. And it is another way. And you can't do the same things anymore because there's no motivation there in the same way. Now you move differently. You move through energy, not this old way of motivating, because you don't have that anymore. And so that's what the theurgy comes in. And theurgy is a fascinating thing, because now it's just like that, playing with the energy that's been a result of your alchemy. It's a true creative process. And it's fascinating. And this is, sometimes I refer to it as the making love, because it feels like it's akin to making love, and it does feel like a creative process, but it doesn't have to involve even other people. It's just the way your energy moves. And there's a lot of things to learn. There's a lot of art there that is just, I'm just barely touching it, and this is why, I don't know, like, and that's why all of these books in the past